Good evening. My name is Kelly, and I'm glad you're here with me. Let's spend a few short minutes together reading and thinking about one of Jesus' parables. Now, this may or may not be my very favorite parable, but it's really interesting because of its power to reveal the thinking of God and to reveal that to us as Christ personally invites us to ponder the mind of God with respect to the world, the gospel, a stark line of demarcation in terms of allegiance in the hearts of people, and finally, God's enemy. Let's read together, starting in Matthew chapter 13. We'll read 24 through 30. Another parable he, that is Jesus, set before them, saying, "The kingdom of the heavens is like a man sowing good seed in his field. But during the sleep of men, his enemy came and oversowed tares in between the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and produced fruit, then the tares were also revealed. So the slaves of the housemaster approaching said to him, 'Lord, didn't you sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares?' And he said to them, 'A man who is my enemy did this.' So the slaves said to him, 'Do you want us to go away and collect them?' But he said, 'No, lest in collecting the tares you should root up the wheat together with them. Leave both to grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will say to the reapers, first collect the tares and bind them into bundles to burn them, but the wheat gather into my barn.'" Now let me construct just the barest context of this parable a bit for you. It comes smack in the middle of an inclusio, which is a fancy word for a literary framework that Matthew constructed to provide context to the points that he makes between a starting bookend, which we find in chapter 12, verses 46 through 50, and an ending bookend, which is found in chapter 13, verses 54 through 58. There are three primary points in between. So these bookends concern themselves with two questions that are couched in an overarching emphasis on things hidden and revealed. And those 2 points, or those two questions, are: what constitutes a family relationship in covenant language? And two, what do the biases behind my perspective, be they right or wrong, support or hinder my kinship within the kingdom? Do these biases support or hinder my kinship within the kingdom? So the three primary parables, the three primary points that fall between these two bookends, are understood within this context of being children of the kingdom. So let's look now at Jesus' explanation of the parable, beginning in chapter 13 and verse 36, and we'll read through 43. "Then, sending away the crowds, he came into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, 'Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field.' And he answering said, 'The one sowing the good seed is the Son of Man. And the field is the world. And the good seed, they are the sons of the kingdom. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy sowing them is the devil. And the harvest is the completion of the age. And the reapers are angels. Therefore, as the tares are collected and consumed with fire, thus it will be at the completion of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all the entrapments leading to sin, and the ones doing lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be the wailing and the gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The one having ears to hear, let him hear." For those who would enjoy a longer talk about the meaning and the ramifications of this parable, I would invite you to contact the channel that is hosting this video. We'd love to hear from you and to talk with you. But for now, let me pose some thoughts and questions to stimulate your thinking about what Jesus is actually saying to us and how the implications of that might enrich our hearts and our service and our understanding. There's a Greek word here that's used, zizania. It's a plural word, and it's usually translated weeds or tares. And this word is taken by most scholars to mean darnel, which is a ryegrass that looks very much like wheat in the early stages of its growth. There's also evidence that Roman law in the first century prohibited sowing darnel among the wheat of others. So notice how strong the overall emphasis on things hidden and revealed extends from the bookends, from the inclusio, into this parable, this middle of the three parables that are primary in this passage. One of the things that the enemy may not be aware of, but that we certainly should take notice of, is the beneficial effect that weeds or tares can have on the wheat. God has not sown the weeds in the world. Rather, his enemy has done so. And the obvious harm that comes from the weeds is in their competition with the wheat for resources such as moisture, soil nutrients, sunshine. So while the housemaster would not have sown these weeds, he is in favor of leaving them in place at the point at which they become noticeable and supporting them until harvest time. This brings to mind a line from the Lord's Prayer. Give us today, or this day, our daily bread. Or perhaps more particularly from the Greek, the necessary bread, or that which sustains our needs, the sustenance which fills our needs. The workers in this parable might be able to carefully go in and cut the weeds off at the ground without uprooting the wheat, but they would certainly lose some of the wheat in the process. And each one of those wheat plants, we are told, is worth to God more than the whole world. If we look carefully, and this is very important, there is a sense here in which the wheat that endures will benefit from the strife of growing among and competing against the tares. Note also that the greatest number of wheat grains is not the goal. A sterile environment would best produce that. God's goal more closely aligns to focus on thriving in the midst of adversity. That is the proven quality of the grains. Not the quantity, but the proven endurance, no matter what. This is a major principle used by seed companies in producing seed today. It certainly would have been understood very well by Jesus' agrarian audience. More important to God than putting the enemy to rights while the wheat is in the field is his intense focus on supporting the growth of the wheat in every way possible. In 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 9, we see this principle illustrated with the metaphor of the eyes of God roving to and fro throughout the earth, seeking to support those whose hearts are completely his. If we were to live in a world in which only faithful yet untested servants of God lived, would we be better off? Would our faith grow as strong without the testing and the trials to which we are subjected by living in this world? God is able to use the evil one and his sons, the tares, to enlighten us with an understanding that only ever reaches its pinnacle in the midst of our striving against the entrapments to sin and striving against those whose allegiance is ultimately to something other than God. Just as in another parable about similar looking trees, it is in the fruit that wheat becomes distinct from tares. Our deeds are visible. What evidence is found in our fruit? In my fruit, in your fruit. In the midst of adversity all around us, am I focused on thriving, on making the most of the opportunities brought by the sunshine, the rain, the truth of the gospel, the circumstances in which my life exists, the things that we encounter day to day? Am I nurturing the fertility of my heart? That is, making it a soil that is conducive to growth through faith and through obedience in the hiding of God's word in it. Can God's word thrive in my heart because of the way I prepare it and the way that I seek to nurture that? Let us remember most of all that our faith in God is precious to Him and draws Him closer to us so that we can grow closer to Him and we become closer to one another as well. Let me encourage you this evening to retool your thinking, to consider the adversities that you encounter as additional opportunities for growth, in which our sweet understanding of God and His nature are so much the fuller because of it. Think back to the last verse we read in chapter 13 there, verse 43, and what that verse says about the wheat which has endured to the end and has overcome. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Oh, how I look forward to being there and experiencing that with all the children of the kingdom. It's going to be a great day. May God bless you today on your path to a glory that shines like the sun. Grace and peace from God the Father be with you today.